In this video, we'll be handling the response that we got back from the authorization server of the OAuth provider, okay? And whenever the user granted the request, we'll be provided with the authorization code. So with this authorization code, we can now request for access token from the OAuth provider. So with the access token, we can now access the user's data from the resource server of the OAuth provider, okay? And you can see here we also have the state parameter, okay? So this state is the state that we generated at this point, okay? So with this random state, we can actually verify if it is the same user that made the request that is sending back the response. You know, we also store the state in the user's browser. So in this video, we also be comparing if the state that is coming back with the response is the same as the state that is on the user browser. If we inspect our app now, let's go to application. Okay, so you can see in our cookie storage, we have the same state. If you check, we have 508891 and all of that. We also have 508891, okay? So whenever we are getting this response back from the OAuth provider, we'll be comparing the state from the response with the state that is on the user's browser. So if they are the same, then we're able to know that it is the same user that made the request that we are getting the response back through them. But if they are not the same, then we know that there is a forgery attack there. So we are going to terminate the whole authentication procedure or process, whatever you like to call it, okay? So, and you can see currently we have a 404 page, which is indicating that this endpoint that we directed the user back to is currently not existing. And that is our redirect URI, the URI that we provided there. If you go to your EMV example, you can see that we have this is our domain, and we have the API, we have OAuth, okay, and this is all the redirect URI, okay. We just use this action to identify if the user is trying to sign up or sign in, okay. So this is our redirect URI. We have API, OAuth, then GitHub. If it is Google, this is going to be Google. So currently it is 404 because we've not created that endpoint. So in this video, we'll be creating the endpoint to undo this response we are getting back from the OAuth servers, okay. So to create the endpoint, as you can see now, we have API, we have OAuth, then the provider. So we are going to go to our app directory, okay, and then on this app directory, we're going to be creating the endpoint. So it starts with API, so we're going to have API. Inside of that, we have and followed by GitHub, okay. This is going to be a dynamic endpoint because it can also be Google. So we're going to call this provider, all right. So either GitHub or Google, we're going to grab that in the params, okay. And then here we're going to have route.ts, all right. Now you can see that we are now having a different error here. Initially, we had a 404 error page because the endpoint did not exist. But now the endpoint is existing, but we've not handled the response. That is why we have this page is not working. So here we are going to be exporting a get function. So I'm going to export, okay. It's going to be an async function, all right. So we're going to call this get because we are handling a get response. You can see we have a get response here, so that is why this is get, okay. And the first parameter is the request, okay. This is going to be of data type next request, okay. We import that, all right. And we also need to get the params, all right, which is where we are going to extract either it is Google or it is GitHub, okay. So we are going to have params here, okay. So this is going to be of data type. We are going to have object. Side of this we have params, okay. This is going to be a promise. Side of the object we are going to have provider, which is going to be of data type string, okay. So first off, now we need to get our provider, okay. So we have const provider. We're going to give it an alias of raw provider because we need to validate the provider if it is actually an expected provider. Anytime you are getting data from an external source, you ensure that you validate that data so that it doesn't break your whole application, okay. So also we need to get the authorization code. We're going to be having request, okay, dot next URL dot search params, okay, then dot get. So the ID is the identifier is code. Let me duplicate this. We also need to get state, okay. So this is going to be state, and also we need to get the action. This is the action, either it is sign up or sign in, but we are going to call it raw action. We also need to verify, okay. So I'm going to call this action. All right, so first off, let's verify the provider and the action to ensure that we are getting the expected provider and action. So here we are going to create a Zod schema to validate the provider and the action. So we are going to combine them into the same array. I'm going to have a, let's call it provider. We can also create this schema inside of this Zod schema file, okay. But since we just need this only here, we can as well create it here. So we are going to have Zod.tuple, not object at this point, okay. All right, so we're going to be using this schema to validate both the provider and the action. And let me close my sidebar also. Okay, so let's validate provider and the action. So we're going to have sources, and we also have our data. So we're going to have equal to provider action schema dot save pass, okay. Then we're going to be passing, going to have an array. We're going to pass the raw provider and the raw action, okay. So here we are going to check if the validation is not successful. Okay, so we have if not success, then we are going to be redirecting the, if it is not successful, we're going to redirect the user back to the home page because we are not getting the expected provider and action. The expected provider is either Google or GitHub, and the action should either be sign in or sign up. Okay, so if the user did not tamper with the request, then we are supposed to get them. But if we are not getting them, that means the user has tampered with the request. And also, if there was an error, okay, if the user declined the request, we will also not be having the action. So that is also going to redirect the user back to home page. This check now is performing two actions. If this validation is not successful, it redirects the user to the home page. And if the user denies the request, okay, then we will not be having the action as part of the response, and the user will be redirected back to the home page, okay. So now let's get the actual provider, the provider and the action, okay. So we're going to have data. All right, now let's say const page, okay. We want to get our page. So if action is equal to sign in, then page should be sign in, but if not, then page should be sign up, okay. So we have a sign up, right? So if we want to redirect, we know which page the user should be redirected to, okay. Now we are going to check if there is code as part of the response we are getting. We're going to say if type of code is not equal to string, we have string, okay. Or if the type of state, if code or state, if they are not string, the user must have declined a request or an error occurred, okay. You know, here when we are getting the state, you can see state is either string or null. It will be string if the state is part of the response we are getting. It will be null if it is not, okay. And same as code, if there is code in the response, we are going to get string. But if there is no code in the response, if there is no code in the response, then it is going to be null, okay. So we need to check if we are getting both the code and the state. If we are not getting them, that is the check we are doing here. If code is not a string and if state is not a string, then we are going to be redirecting the user, okay. And the URL is going to be, we are going to first have page, which is what we created here, okay. So if the action is sign in, then we direct the user to sign in. If the action is not sign in, we redirect the user to sign up page, okay. So that is why we have page there. And then we're going to be passing search params, okay. We have question mark, then we have a O error, okay. So we're going to have this to be equal to, so you can say field to connect to either Google or GitHub. So here we're going to interpolate the provider, field to connect to Google or GitHub. Then you can say please try again. We'll be handling this error on the front end, okay. That is going to redirect the user to the appropriate page, either sign in or sign up, okay. But if our code is able to go beyond this step, that means the user granted the permission. That means we're having code and we're also having state. Okay, so we are going to be fetching our user, okay, since the user granted the permission. So we'll be fetching the user. Okay, we're going to have await, then we're going to have fetch user. We're going to be creating the function in a minute. Okay, but since it's going to be an asynchronous function, we're going to use our custom try catch wrapper. Okay, yeah, okay, so I'm going to wrap that with try catch, and we'll be passing some arguments to our function. We're going to pass provider, we're going to pass the code, okay, we're going to pass the state, and we're going to pass the action. Okay, before we leave this place, let's just undo the possible error so that we just know that we want to deal with fetching user all at once. So we're going to have a OAuth user. Okay, that is the user we'll be getting back from this function. Okay, and then we're going to have a OAuth user error just in case an error occurred. Okay, so here we're going to be checking if there was an error. We're going to have if OAuth user error is true, that means an error occurred fetching the user. Then we're going to redirect the user back to the corresponding page. Okay, this is going to be the same as this, so we're going to copy this. Okay, let me just copy the URL. I'm going to paste that here. All right, okay, so we're having this error because there is no equal sign here. So now we need to create this fetch user function, and inside of the, before we can fetch the user, we first need to fetch the auth token. So we'll be doing all of that in this function. Now let's create this function in our OAuth client file. So we're going to go to OAuth client. That's why we have this file, so that we can have everything that has to do with OAuth in the same file. I'm going to close that. So that's going to get us our cookie store. Now let's get our state. So we're going to call it state from cookie store. That's going to be cookie store dot get. Then we're going to be passing the key, which is what was the name? I think it's state what did we call it? State cookie key. Okay, that's it there. So that's going to be getting us the cookie if it is the cookie store of the user browser. Now we need to check if the state that is in the cookie is the same as the state that is coming alongside with the response. Okay, so here we're going to perform that check. We're going to say if, okay, if the state that is coming from the response is not the same as the state that is in the user browser's cookie store. If they are not the same, then we are going to be throwing an error because we have a forgery attack. All right, so we have error. Okay, then we are going to be saying invalid state. You can also say an error occurred, whatever message you want to pass along. Now that is going to verify our state for us. Okay, if the state is valid, then we can proceed to go and fetch the access token. Okay, so we're going to have const, okay, or for now let's just create the token. Okay, so we're going to have the name of the function that is going to do that for us, fetch token, or you can call it fetch access token. So we'll be passing the code alongside. We are going to pass the action. Okay, we're going to pass the provider. All right, now let's create this fetch token function. Oh, so this is supposed to be colon, not comma. All right, I'm going to save that. Okay, so what is the error here? This comparison appears to be unintentional because type string. Oh, sorry, we are supposed to extract the value. This is going to be an object. Okay, so if it is present, then we need to extract the value, all thanks to TypeScript. Okay, so now let's create this function. We can create it at the top here. Create state. Let's put this down. It's going to take some space up there. Okay, so let's create our fetch token function, a sync function. So we're going to call it fetch token. This is the function that is going to help us to fetch the access token. Okay, so what are the things we are accepting? Code, action, and provider. Let's just copy all of those. Okay, so we're going to paste them here. Then we're going to be providing the data type. There should be a parenthesis here. This is going to be of data type string. Okay, this is also going to be action, is also going to be of data type action. We already have that type, and this is going to be of data type OAuth provider. Okay, So now let's begin the process of fetching our access token, but we'll be needing some details from this object. So first off, let's get the config. Okay, the configuration. So we're going to have config just like we have earlier. Okay, we did something like that here. So I'm going to have config to be equal to, then we're going to have our OAuth configs. Okay, then we're going to have a provider. Okay, now we need to make a network request. So we're going to use the fetch function. Okay, so we need to send the request to config. You can remember we have an endpoint to get the token, so we're going to be using this endpoint. That's going to be config.token URL. Okay, now we need to pass some options. Okay, the method is going to be post. All right, if you let me see if I still have the okay, so I still have the documentation there. You can see now that it's a post request that we're expected to send. Okay, so this is going to be of method post. All right, then we're going to have headers. Okay, then we're going to have an object. The content type, this is going to be string. Content is going to be application. All right, okay, that's going to be the content type. Okay, and what type of data do you want to accept? Want to accept JSON data type, so we're going to have application slash JSON, and then the body of our request. So we're going to go outside of this header subject. The body of our request is going to be URL slash param. So we have new, then we have a URL slash params. Okay, did we do any imports? We don't need to import anything. All right, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so where are we? URL slash params. Okay, so we need to pass some parameters in there. So we're going to have a client ID. It's going to be config dot client ID. All right, we also need to pass along our client secret. Okay, so this client secret should be secret. Okay, so these are requests we want to make will be between server to server. That's between our own server and the OAuth authorization server. Okay, this is not going through the user browser. We also need to pass the authorization code along. All right, let's just use ES6 syntax there. We also need to pass the redirect URI. Okay, this is going to be config. Okay, not config. Let's just copy what we have here. Okay, it should be at the top so that we are not retyping the same thing. I'm just going to copy all of this. Okay, it's the same redirect URI, so I'm going to paste that here. And now we're going to have grant type. The grant type is going to be authorization code, because that is what we want to present to get the, oh sorry, this is supposed to be string. We want to present the authorization code to get the access token. All right, so we'll be making this request. We'll be sending the request to the authorization server of the OAuth provider. Okay, so after the fetch request, then we are going to be handling the response. So we have .then. Okay, so here we are going to be having a response. Okay, we need to accept our response as a parameter here. So we have a response. Okay, this is going to be response dot JSON. We need to invoke that. Then we also have then. Okay, so here we are going to be getting data, or let's call it raw data, because we need to validate any data we are getting from an external source. All right, so we are going to have a function here. First off, let's console log the data we are getting so that we know what it actually looks like. We are accepting access token and some other data that the OAuth provider might send back, but very importantly, we need the access token. We are still going to validate the data, but let's see what we are getting back first so that we can validate it. So let's catch any possible error. So here we are going to have console log, and we're going to have a error. Okay, we need to accept the error here. Okay, so first off, let's see what our data looks like. Then we can now validate the data. So okay, we need to import this function. Okay, for now, let's get rid of this. We are not using it so that TypeScript can keep quiet. Let me save that. Is there anything we need to do here again? We've invoked the function. Okay, so let's see what we've got. All right, I'm going to go back to our app now. Okay, let me get rid of all of this so that we can make a fresh request. Okay, so I'm going to go to this, then click on GitHub. All right, so I'm going to authorize app. Okay, so let's see what we've got. Okay, so this is the response that we got back from fetching the access token. So this is what we have as our raw data. You can see we have the access token, we have the token type, and we have the scope, which was the scope that we passed along initially when we redirected our user to the OAuth authorization server. Okay, so this is what we are expecting. Now we need to get the access token and the token type outside of this response. Okay, so now we need to validate this with a Zod schema. Where are we? Okay, this is the point we are. So let's create a Zod schema for that. So we are going to go to the Zod schemas file. Okay, so this is it here. Okay, so we're going to come here. All right, so here we're going to export. We need to export our token schema. Okay, so here we're going to have z.object. Since we also be having the Google OAuth provider, so we are just going to combine the structure for both Google and GitHub. So we'll be having some optional data type. So access token is very important for both provider. So this one is going to be compulsory. So we're going to have z.string token type. We also need token type for both provider. So this one is also going to be z.string. All right, we are going to have a refresh token. Google used to provide refresh token, but GitHub don't provide refresh token. So we are going to make this optional. As you can see, there was no refresh token in the response we got back. Okay, so we're going to make this optional. Okay, we're also going to provide our scope. As you can see, scope was part of the response we got back. Okay, so we're going to have string. All right, string. Okay, so this one is also optional. We actually don't need it, but it's part of the response, so you can also put that. We're also going to provide the expires in. We have expires in as the time what we are getting is going to expire. It's going to be of data type number, and then we're going to have our optional. So these two are the most important thing that we need: the access token and the token type. All of these we don't need them. We just need to use the access token wants to access the user's data, and that's all we need to do. Okay, so now we're going to import this schema here. All right, where are we? Okay, to validate what we got. Okay, let me get rid of that, or let me comment it out just in case we need it for Google. All right, here we're going to have our token schema. We need to import that dot save pass. Okay, now we're going to pass our raw data. Okay, so here we are going to get the sources and the sources and the data sources comma data. Okay, so now we need to check if the validation is successful. I'm going to say if success is not true. If success is not true, then we're going to throw an error. Okay, so throw, we can just throw error directly. Error doesn't compulsorily need the new keyword. Invalid authorization code. Authorization code, or possibly, no, it should be invalid authorization code. If there was an error, to be cached here. Okay, so now we need to return the access token and the refresh token. So I'm going to have the return keyword. We're going to have an object. We have the access token, which we are getting from the OAuth provider.access token. We also need the token type, or what is the keyword token type. Yeah, that's what we needed. I'm going to close that. Of token type. Okay, this is going to be data dot token type. Okay, we need a comma here. Okay, so I'm going to save that. All right, where did we called? Okay, so here we can get the access token and the refresh token, which we are going to now use to fetch the user details in the fetch user function. So here we are going to have access token, and we're also going to have a token type. Okay, we need to have an equal symbol here. All right, so here let's console log a simple statement to get rid of those errors. We have console.log. Okay, so we have the access token and we also have the token type. All right, okay, so we're having this error. TypeScript is telling us that there is the possibility that our fetch user function might not return anything. So to get rid of that error, let's go to, okay, so at this point we've returned something at this point. Okay, so if there is an error, rather than console logging the error, let's just throw the error. So we're going to have throw new error. Okay, and we're going to throw the error, or let's just throw the error without doing all of those rigmaroling. Okay, so that is going to get rid of that error. Okay, so now with this access token and the refresh token, we can now fetch the user's data from the OAuth provider resource server. So we'll be fetching the user's data in the next video. All right, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.